How to build something from absolutely nothing. Welcome to part 2 of our Build series curriculum. So excited about having my wife here today as we talk with you today about how to build something great for God. You know, my wife and I, we've been married now coming up 35 years. We have 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and 5 and counting, many counting. So welcome. So glad that you joined me today.
Glad to be here today.
We're going to have a good time today.
Yes,
for
I'm
sure.
excited about it.
Well, we're kind of doing this because we've hit the 30-year anniversary of our church from when Lisa and I were 30 and 28 when we ventured out to plant a church. And now 30 years later, this is where we are, Pastor Dustin and Jamie leading the church. And man, we just have so many people that are being reached and have been reached, and it's just been a blessing. But it all started really from not much. When I talk about something from nothing, let's talk a little bit about that.
It was really nothing. It was just the two of us, and we had no people, we had no money. We had no place to go, and we had no connections for what we were wanting to do. Right. Mm-hmm. So there really was nothing.
It was a venture of faith for sure.
Yes.
Well, a lot of people will ask from time to time, why did y'all start the church? How did y'all start the church? And so I just wanted to talk from right at the beginning, just to kind of give people an understanding about what you were 28 and I was 30. I was on staff at a church, at a large church, and we were headed in a particular direction with church. We had a lot of connections and a lot of support, but both of us were wanting more than what we were experiencing, and we knew that we needed to do something different. And you want to speak a little to that?
Well, we are so grateful for the roots that we came from. Mm-hmm. I was at the church where you came, met you there, where I'd grown up my entire life, and I'm so grateful for everything that they planted into me. But both of us separately had experienced a little bit more of the Holy Spirit and more expressive worship. And we really did believe that everything that we read in the Bible was true for today, and that we could still see miracles, still see healings, all of the gifts were for today. And so we had a longing to do that. And we were so thankful. We loved where we were, but I believe we just began to get dissatisfied, feeling like it's time to move.
Right.
Move on. And so we wanted to start a church that had very expressive worship, and we wanted it to be a church that we actually wanted to go to and that we could raise our kids in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember because we had a lot of influence with a lot of people where we were. A lot of people loved us, a young, up-and-coming ministry couple. And so kind of conventional wisdom would be connect with those people, raise support from those people before we venture out. And then, we kind of have money to go a year or two into this thing.
Right.
And of course, my dad mentioned, you're really going to quit your job, to go do something with no support. And, we'd been married, I think 4 years at that time. And I can't imagine, your soft-spoken dad, what he actually believed, what he thought whenever we were telling him that. It's probably why he never liked me.
That's not true.
He liked me. I think when he turned 96 or something, he finally liked me. And so, but I do remember the Lord clearly saying to us, I will be your provider. And so we are a testament of 30 years of God being our provider.
Absolutely.
We've never had major excess of money, but God has always taken care of us and given us above and beyond, for sure. So we're in this 3-part series, and the first part was with Pastor Dustin. So grateful to have him in, and we went through the 5 building principles that both he and I incorporated over the 30-year period to build something great for God. We had a great time. And then our part 3, Lisa and I are going to invite Jamie Bates, Dustin's wife, in, and the 3 of us are going to talk, and I'm going to kind of just sit down and interview them. And these 2 ladies have been a part of this church the entire time. And they know behind the scenes. When you pull back the curtain, they know what was happening. So we're going to get a little
some fun,
kind of behind the scenes of what's going on and what went on over these 30 years. And we'll let you in on that. But today we're talking about how to build something with nothing. And so when we're talking about building something with nothing, we really are talking about a faith journey. And I remember as we were really launching out to do this, and we did not have the support from any church, any missions organization. We did not build support, personal support, but we did sense the hand of God. And so whatever it is that you want to build, you might as well build it for God. So if you're trying to build a business, if you're building a ministry, a church, a family, a marriage, why not do it for God? And you will be amazed, even if you might not have the resources, all the greatest connections. I want you to understand, you'll be amazed at what God can actually do. And so I want to talk a little bit more about how we move forward and how we planted the church. And so you want to take over a little bit from there? But we eventually decided that, we needed to be gone. We felt convicted to do that. And so we quit our job.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before you actually quit, you felt like we needed to be somewhere near George Bush Freeway 190, which actually wasn't even built yet.
There was no 190. And that was the east-west thoroughfare here in Dallas that was going to be a huge thoroughbred.
And so we wanted to be somewhere where people could come in literally from the north, south, east, and west. And so you had looked at a map and you knew that. So you and I went and got a miracle home. God has done everything's been a miracle home for us, but we found a miracle home and we got a mortgage because once he quit his job, what bank is going to give us any kind of a job? Mm-hmm. I mean, any kind of a loan.
Yep.
And so you did that. And the next month you quit your job. And
I don't know if the banker was counting on that, but we did.
But you quit your job, and thankfully, you don't have to pay that first month. And they had a going away party for us at our former church, and they gave us enough money that we were able to pay the first month mortgage when it was our time to pay. Yeah. And so we started out that way. It was totally in faith. We had nothing, but we just knew that we wanted to go and you go on with this vision that the Lord had given us.
We had a real desire to have worship be the priority of every believer. And our tagline, our vision statement was worship that impacted the world. And we see that 30 years later, and it's still happening. Yes. Worship that's impacting the world. And so we wanted to have a church that was a worshiping church, a church that would reach the next generation, focus on the next generation and their families, a church that would be open to the power of the Holy Spirit, a church that could meet needs, emotional and spiritual needs of people. And so we had all this in our mind, but we really didn't have anything in our pocketbook. But we did have a vision. And that's the first building principle that we talked about in part one, is that you have to have a vision. And a vision is basically what we can see God doing futuristically with this. And so you got to be able to see something before you build it.
Right.
And so I remember one of the things I've thought about with vision is that vision doesn't cost anything.
No.
You don't have to have any connection to have business, have vision. You don't have to have any money. You don't have to have resources to have vision. Right. And so you can have vision for free. And so we need to ask the Lord to give us vision. And as Pastor Dustin mentioned in part one, he uses he stretches himself with vision. And he says, I get curious. What could God do with me? What could God do with this ministry? And that really helps us get vision.
I think too, want to add to that with vision, what we have seen for over these 30 years is that anytime that you have a vision that the Lord has given to you, He becomes your provision when you need. Yeah. Now, it wasn't for us, it was not there, but some people might have it beforehand to step out. We did not. It was a step of faith, which you'll talk about in a little bit. But God always provided for his assignment for us.
I love that. Every assignment that God gives us, he provides for.
Right.
Every assignment he will provide. Now, sometimes we want him to provide for assignments that he didn't give us.
Right.
But if we know without a shadow of a doubt, we have a vision, we know we've gotten a word from God that this is what we're to do, he will provide for that assignment. I remember playing basketball right after we left. We were playing basketball at the church and church league, and I met Creighton Kent. And first time I had met him, we were playing basketball together, shooting some hoops, and he was at, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, matter of fact, I just resigned my position here. He says, you did? And he says, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to start a church. He says, tell me about it. And Creighton was so encouraging, so excited, and it just, that vision just rung true with him. Right. And he went home to Donna, and we got together, the four of us. It was really the first meeting that we ever had to cast the vision of what God had given to us. And those two bought in hook, line, and sinker, still with us today. Right. Creighton was, you just could not have had a better couple and a better family than the Kents. Creighton was my first board member. Donna was our first staff member, and literally has been on staff ever since until just this past year. And so you look at that, and then we would have people into our house. Right. And we would. And
we were just looking for anybody to meet. Yeah. On the street, whatever. We were trying to meet people.
People would say, hey, what do y'all do? We're starting a church. Right. Well, tell me about the church. And we'd tell a little bit and say, well, Thursday night, we're going to be at our house and we're going to tell all about it. And so you literally had a PowerPoint presentation that you did on the wall for people. And to say, this is what we see. And so I'd lay out the vision for people. Now, most people were very kind and considerate and loving. And they'd say, well, that's not for us, but we did. By the time a few months rolled around before we launched, we had probably a couple handfuls of really committed people to start with us. And then we started. And it was sacrificial
for them too. I know when we met Donna and Creighton, Donna was pregnant and they had two older boys. Mm-hmm. And so they were leaving a great church to come help start a church where there was nothing, no children's ministry, nothing. And other people did the same thing. They had children and they were leaving some of the biggest churches that were in all of DFW, and they were coming to help us.
Right. So here's the bottom line: if we would have waited for resources, if we were waited for contacts, if we would have waited for money, we would have never started the church.
We wouldn't have.
But what we did we had a dream. We had a vision. And I'm thinking about the vision, honey, and when it comes right down to it, it's not selfish, but in a way, we built the church
that we'd want to go to.
That's what we basically said. What kind of church? And so we were talking about, we designed a church and built a church according to what we felt like the Lord leading us, but it was a church that we wanted to go to.
And we wanted our kids to go to.
Our future kids.
Yes, we were. When we had our first launch, I was pregnant with our son, Stephen, but we wanted it where our children would want to go. And what is so amazing, 30 years later, we have 3 grown children. 2 of them are married, 5 grandchildren, and they all attend this church and they all serve in this church.
They've all grown up in this church. Yes. They attend this church. Right. Literally the vision that we had 31 years ago about building a church that we wanted to go to, we could see it, and a church that we wanted our future kids. We didn't even think about grandkids at the time, but now our grandkids, they're going to the church. Right. They're literally walking in the vision that we had. It's amazing.
I look too at our staff. We have a lot of young staff people, and a lot of them weren't born, and so it's just, it's amazing sometimes when you look around and you really can't believe it. It's just like, thank you, Lord.
It's amazing. It's longevity. And we're going to talk a little bit about the last point is just don't quit. And that's part of kind of our secret. Just go out there, have a vision, go for it, and don't hold on and don't
pedal
quit.
to the metal.
But the second building principle that we want to focus on is purpose. And purpose is why we do the things that we do. And so not the vision of, what we can see God doing, but why? What's the motivation? Is it all about us? Is it all about me? Is it all about making me feel better? Am I starting a business because I just want to be rich? I want to have my bills paid. Having bills paid and having resources are great things. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we plant churches? Why do we have youth ministries? Why do we start ministries? And so that's important. And so when I think about purpose, honey, I just think about as we planted the church and literally over the first 20 years before we transitioned the church, I cannot count all the different jobs that you had. Could you help me just name some of the things that you did as a free labor, pastor's wife, all the things that you did?
Well, I helped literally clean, like all of us did.
Mm-hmm.
I helped with the children's ministry. I ran the women's ministry. I sang on the worship team, counseled people, get up on Sundays and encourage people. I led and facilitated Bible studies, met with you to share the vision. We tried to meet with couples and help them with their marriage. So just a lot lot of different
Everything
things.
you could absolutely imagine. You didn't play the piano. That's
I
about
did
the
not.
only thing. And,
you don't want to hear me play.
She can play though,
but not that well.
But just about. So my question to you is, obviously you were my wife. We were the founders of the church. But why? Why did you do all those things? What motivated you to do those things?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is necessity, really.
It's part of it.
Necessity, because we needed help in those areas. But I really had a heart for people. My spiritual gifts are exhortation and mercy. And so I always want to encourage and uplift people and have compassion for people, love people. And so I wanted people to come in and experience the presence of the Lord. I wanted them to have expressive worship. I wanted them to be able to see that what the Bible says can happen and is true could be true for their lives. And so it was because of the vision, because of the call that we had, and so I stepped in to do what I needed to do.
When there is a vision, as you're saying, there is a vision, sometimes the purpose, although we want to do everything to be kingdom, it's all about kingdom, it's not about us. But sometimes the purpose of it is to carry out the vision.
Right.
And even though you don't feel like it's a direct line to God, but you have a vision and you do things, you pick up trash because it's part of the vision.
Cleaning toilets wasn't my favorite thing to do.
Right. No, you do these things because you're carrying out the vision.
Right.
And although they might not have been your spiritual gifts or we did things that you have to do. And sometimes you just have to do things. Okay. You go, what's the purpose of this? Well, you need to look at the vision and it can tell you the purpose. Honey, one of the things that our church, from the first service to this last service that we had just recently, that our church is known for, and that is that we make guests and people feel welcome. And right now, it's a very sophisticated system. We have multiple campuses, okay? Hundreds and hundreds of people coming. We have so many new people coming. And so we have volunteers that serve. But all that started was when we had 30, 40, 50 people on a Sunday morning, and you were the one that made sure people feel welcome. Tell people why that happened.
Well, where I grew up, there were so many times that I felt like I was left out or necessarily wasn't in the group or whatever, the clique, and it was painful to be in church.
Yep.
So I never wanted anybody to come to church and feel pain and feel left out, like they weren't important. And so the reason, I just wanted anybody that came in to feel loved, to feel special, to feel seen, to feel like they could become a part, and I realized, we know, like when we go places, if someone is rude to us or doesn't give us any kind of doesn't connect with us in any way, it doesn't really make you want to go back.
Right.
And so I knew that if people came to church, it wouldn't matter how great the worship was,
That's true.
how great the preaching was,
True.
that if they did not feel like they were welcomed and feel like they could see themselves there. They weren't never going to come back, or probably wouldn't have come back. And then they wouldn't hear about the gospel. They wouldn't learn about freedom. And so that was the reason I just really wanted people to feel loved.
Lisa was our guest experience team. I mean, seriously, she embodied it. And from that point on, it was catching. But what's interesting to know is, honey, what you said is that from your pain, you found purpose. And a lot of times we can find purpose, kingdom purpose, from our pain, because we don't want others to go through that. And that is about the Lord, you know. But it is all about kingdom. The purpose has to be about kingdom. You know, I remember after we transitioned the church to Pastor Dustin and Jamie. And about 2 years after that, I think we finally got to a point to where we really believed that they wanted us around. Okay. And, you know, of course, we would not have had any problem if they wouldn't have felt comfortable with us, you know, the founding pastors being here. But, you know, we continue.
Yeah, because generally whenever you transition anything, that business, church, whatever, the people that started it leave to make room for the new people.
And we were open to that. But we did, for the first 2 years, we really went down low and under the radar. And he and I continued to meet every week, and he was pulling every bit of information I could give him. He was so hungry, and as he was doing just a phenomenal job. But you know, I think we must have been in a foxhole together or something, and I helped him get out of some mess. And I remember, and you reminded me this just recently. I remember him looking at me and looking across his desk and said, "Pastor, we don't ever expect to be pastor in this church without you and Miss Lisa here." And I'm like, I came home to you and I said, okay, we're staying. They want us here. And so
thank goodness.
and so pretty quickly after that, you know, Dustin and I met at our weekly time, and I'd been talking to him about the importance of starting a new campus, because we were just busting the seams. And he came back one day very excited. Hey, we're going to start a new campus. We've been doing the demographics, and we're going to go to Wiley and all these things. I'm like, that is awesome. So proud of you. So excited. I said, and who do you have to pastor that? You know? And he says, well, that's the thing. He says, I was talking to Jamie, and he's blaming this on Jamie. And so I was talking to Jamie, and
don't we always get blamed?
It's true. And Jamie said, well, Dustin, if there was one couple that you'd want to start this campus, who would it be? And he says, Pastor Steve and Lisa. She says, why don't you ask them? And I remember he asked me that day, but that week, Lisa and I had just come together and prayed and said, Lord, we've been sitting low for two years. Our answer is yes to whatever it is you have for us. And then Dustin asked us to do it. So we were excited about being the campus pastors. And so of Wiley, the first campus that we started, and that extension campus that we had, we got to be the pastors of that. We got to start it. And people will say, wow, wait, you were the founding pastors, and then you came under the new lead pastor, and then gave up the big church to go start this Wiley campus, and said, why did you do that? And our answer is kingdom. It's kingdom. It's about building up the kingdom. It's not building up our kingdom. It's not building me up. It's building up the kingdom. And so the purpose of whatever it is that you're wanting to build, it just has to be kingdom, or it's all for naught. And so thirdly, the third principle that we want to talk to you about in building is faith. And believe you me, we had to walk in faith. And so we want to take just a moment, okay, and we're going to just share a few stories, faith stories. They're fun stories, but it says you overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. These are some great testimonies to remember. But I remember, we had this vision of all kind of having worship and instruments and sound and all the things that, we have now 30 years later. Okay. But we had nothing.
No.
I mean, we didn't have a record player. I might have had a boombox, and that's about it. Seriously, 30 years ago. And so We had no idea what we were going to do, but I remember one day I was walking out of a breakfast, I did a Bible study or something. Somebody asked me to do a Bible study. And so then I was walking out and there was this guy and I said, just normal. Hey, how you doing? And he goes, terrible. And I'm like, terrible. Now, I think that's a sign from God that you're supposed to stop, okay? A Christian, good Samaritan.
Have a good day.
is supposed to stop.
Right.
And so I stopped and I talked with him and he started sharing his heart with me. And that morning, right there on the porch of that restaurant, I led him to Jesus. I mean, he got radically saved and he said, will you come to my house this afternoon because my girlfriend that lives with me, she needs to hear about Jesus too. And so I showed up that afternoon and ready to talk to her. And I walked past his kitchen into his den area. And the very first thing I saw was a huge wall of JBL sound system speakers. I'm talking more than a rock band would need. It was like, what? The whole sound system, he had a set of drums. And that day I led her to the Lord. She ended up being the first person we baptized. And Bill Stanish, that was his name. Bill Stanish was our sound technician for 2 years. Not only was he our sound technician, we used all of his equipment. He loaded it up in a truck, brought it every Sunday, and provided worship for us. Yeah. Now, let me tell you, that is faith. You're stepping out in faith, and that's God delivering in faith. Such a powerful, powerful thing.
Oh, it is. Amazing.
I think about the place where we sit here today, our Allen campus, and there were 6 acres, and now we added another 5. And so we have 11 acres here and we had a little building, but that didn't just happen. We were well past a decade before we owned any property.
Right.
And we needed it desperately. I just wonder, you want to talk a little bit about how we ended up getting the property, because it was a miracle story for sure.
It really was. Well, we had moved several times to several different locations. The last one that we were in was the best one. It was beautiful, completely redone, and the lease ran out, and we knew that we were going to need to move. So we ended up in a party barn.
It's a really nice party barn.
It was my least favorite place that we've ever been.
Lisa didn't fit in the party barn.
Yeah, it wasn't. No, I could tell you stories, but I won't. So we were there and we were praying. We felt like we needed to move. We were on a fast. And you were actually working with someone just to kind of look in Allen for a place. And Allen was not very open to churches coming in at the time. They weren't that friendly to it. And
there was nothing available.
No. And the board got together with you and they pulled out a map.
Yeah, this was on our 21-day prayer and fast, church-wide fast. And so in the middle of that fast, they pulled out a big map and said, okay, we know God's leading us somewhere. Where do you think it is? And so, Pastor Steve, if you had to make a choice right now, where do you think God would be leading us? And so I had the big map. And so I went and I put my finger right across the street from Allen Senior High. Now, there was nothing available. Okay.
Right.
And we couldn't afford any of that property. Right. But that's where I've been.
Right.
And so we prayed, sought the Lord for another year.
Right. And then what happened? The man that you had.
Then we're on a 21-day fast again. The next year to a whole year later. Okay.
And so you still have someone trying to look to help you.
We knew direction to go, but there's still no open door.
So we want to go to Allen. You've got a man trying to help you. Can't really find anything. And a secretary in his office actually talked to the secretary in the church office, which was on this property that we moved to, and said that they were going to put their church up for sale and the acreage, but they had not wanted to yet because they knew that people were trying to come in and put a mosque there. So they didn't want to put it up for sale. So we found out about it, and we just knew in our hearts that was it. And it was right across from Allen High School, what you had placed your finger unknowingly on the map.
Right.
And so we literally had 1 month to raise $400,000.
$400,000. That we had about 100 adults, maybe 125 adults.
And zero money.
Zero money
in savings too.
Yeah.
Right. And so we had that 1 month. And I guess the first miracle that took place to make it possible is that you had gone to someone's birthday party, and he was in ministry, and there was a man there that you also knew. And
a businessman.
Right. And he had helped, fund the ministry for this man and help him for a long time. And you were just leaving the event, and you just said, thank you so much for, helping
Always
your
helping
friend.
him.
And y'all were saying, you said your goodbyes, and you walked away, and he turned around and yelled your name and said, hey, Steve, is there anything that I can help you with?
Right. Is there anything I can help you with?
And so, Steve, you told him what we were trying to do, and he wrote a check for $100,000.
$100,000. Let me tell you something. Living by faith is not boring, and it is fun, but it stretches you. But those are the kind of things, $100,000.
Yes.
And so that started us off. We were 25% on the way.
Yes, we had that. We had a quarter. We were a quarter of the way there. And so, of course, this was exciting to tell the people at church and help build their anticipation, their faith. And so we just began to pray and ask, we all need to give sacrificially. And over that next month, it was the most sacrificial giving that I've ever seen. And at that time, we only had one family from Allen.
Right.
That was actually attending our church.
A single mom.
Right.
From Allen.
Right.
Just one.
And so we began to pass the offering plates. And over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, we had people that gave away their family vacations, that went into their retirement accounts and pulled it out. People that gave their bonuses. People that literally gave their jewelry, their watches. We had wedding rings in there. It was just, we had children that gave. It was just so sacrificial. And over that amount of time, in 1 month, we raised
over $400,000.
And we were able to make the down payment so that we could get into this property.
It was amazing. It was an absolute miracle.
Yes.
You could just imagine
Yes.
what it was like
Yeah.
when our congregation came to this place.
Right.
And actually had a building after
Probably like
12 years, 14.
Yeah.
The years kind of go by.
Yeah.
But it's just critically important to have faith in anything that you build for God. It's going to require faith. A couple other stories. I remember first year that we were in existence, I think we had maybe 75, 50 adults, 70, something like that. And I, for some reason, allowed a man I did not know very well. I'd met him one time before. And he was from South Africa, and you got to watch out when you give the Africans the pulpit, man. God, Holy Spirit might break out. And so, but it was because I was a kind of a control person, wanted things controlled, and so it was a step of faith for me to do that. And so his name was Bruce Shimwell. He's gone to be with the Lord now. And the reason we tell this because it was such a pivotal experience that we had in the life of our church. And so he preached. And so as he preached, then he was preaching about miracles, signs and wonders, and which is all good.
Which is what we've been believing for.
Yeah,
we want to see.
We thought that.
Yeah,
we
want
didn't
to
quite know how it was going to work. And so then he starts doing ministry. What do you remember from that?
Well, the very first thing he said is there was a woman there who had a leg that was shorter than the other. And he said, if you've never seen a miracle, come forward. And so
most of our people were former Baptist or brand new Christians. Okay.
But literally everyone left their chairs.
Everybody left to go see a miracle.
We saw the first miracle happen there when we saw a leg grow out. And
it was not sleight of hand.
No.
I've seen that trick. And it was not it was actual
we
growth.
Literally
and
saw
we
it.
all like, what is going on?
So it was like the first miracle that we had seen in our body.
And so then we had a lady that right there, she was, I think she was probably 65, 70 at the time. She couldn't bend over to tie her shoes because her back was hurt so bad, hurting so badly that morning. And he prayed for her. She got healed right there on the stage. And that afternoon she was playing softball with her grandkids.
She actually she had I think a rod in her back because she'd been in an accident. And along with being in that accident, she, over the past 3 years after the accident, she began to have grand mal seizures. And she'd had 70 grand mal seizures.
Grand mal seizures.
Over that period of 3 years.
In 3 years.
And so he prayed for her. she literally
She got set free.
She fell out and had a grand mal seizure, but she was set free. And we knew her for the next 28 years. She just passed recently, and she never once had another grand
Not
mal
one time.
seizure.
She was set free totally.
Right.
For 30 years,
Yes.
she was set free before she went to be with the Lord. So some of you are like, man, that sounds exciting. As the lead pastor, it was not exciting. It was totally out of
scary.
my control.
Right.
You know, I was so nervous. I'm like, oh man, we just lost the church.
You can picture someone on the floor having a grand mal seizure, and you're like, she's going to die. And
right.
what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You know?
And so then the last thing that ended up happening that day was I was standing by him, and most people were leaving, had already gone. And by the way, the service was 3 hours.
I think it was 4.
Well,
Actually,
whatever.
we were supposed to have a cookout and so people left early so they could go get everything set up. It was Memorial weekend.
They closed shop and came back and joined us.
We had like a 4-hour service.
It was amazing. And so, so we're standing there as most people are leaving, and there's this sweet young mother. Her name was Shelly Busby, okay? And Shelly her face was so torturous, so painful, as she was sharing her story as briefly as she could about abuse and hurt and pain growing up as a child, and so much bondage, and how they had been trying to find freedom and gone to mental hospitals, and they spent so much money. They went bankrupt, trying medication, trying everything. I mean, she was just so bound up, and she's just with begging on her face, desperation. And this sweet man looked at her just so empathetically and just said, I understand what you're saying. You know, your pastor will get with you this week and take care of that. And I'm
saying,
like,
what pastor?
What pastor are you talking about? Because I have no idea what you're talking about. And of course, I had to once again step out in faith.
Right.
And so we went to her house. I and 2 of our board members went to her house. And I had no idea what I was doing. We listened to her story, and then we started to pray. When we started to pray, I pulled out a book that had prayers in it because I had no idea
Right.
how to do deliverance, how to pray over someone so I started praying the prayer, and she manifested, fell down on the ground, okay? And I'm like, okay, well, I figured that's not good. That's probably a demon. So I've heard you say in the name of Jesus, come out. So I did that, and lo and behold, it came out. And she got back up. And this happened for about 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. And finally I said, Shelly, what's the Lord saying now? What is he showing you now? She waited 10, 15 seconds and then just gave this beautiful, beautiful smile. And she said, my Father says, it is done. It is finished. And her life was totally rocked. The next Sunday?
Yeah, the very next Sunday. And once again, it's faith, stepping out in faith to go pray for someone and believing, okay, if I use in the name of Jesus, it's going to work.
Right.
But the next Sunday, she testified to what had happened, and she was completely changed. She hadn't been a person that wanted to be in front of people, and she was very meek, and she was so bold in sharing what she did. And I remember sitting there listening to her and going, well, that'll never happen to me. And the next week, that happened to me. And that just began a domino effect in our church. And for like the next 3 years or longer.
It was like a deliverance boot camp.
Yes, it was just one person after the other, and word got out. And we had people that flew in, people from other churches that didn't believe in that, showing up at our church. And you were out all hours of the night praying for people, but we really learned about freedom.
Absolutely.
And how to set people free.
And Shelly ended up being on our staff.
Right.
Her family has been just a rock solid, steady family in our church for years and years. They recently moved to Colorado, but their daughter is still here and she's on our staff doing some of the very same things that Shelly did. And so these are just faith stories that are a lot of fun, but I want you to understand they're not comfortable. None of them are comfortable as you're going through them. But when you lean in and you trust God and you embrace the faith and what God's doing, he will show up. It's obviously in the midst of doing something great for God, Lisa, we have obstacles and we have,
Yes.
definitely resistance. So the fourth is conquer. It's a principle that we've got to have a conquering spirit. We've got to conquer. We've got to overcome obstacles. And, one of the obstacles that we had that over the years is just that we never had just hordes of money.
Sometimes we never had any money.
Right. So why don't you tell a little bit about how that was an obstacle? Because, we're a young couple. We have a house. We have 3 children. And how did you go through that? And how do you look at it? And how do you think our children handled it?
Well, especially early on, being a mom with one child, then another, and then another, I wanted to be able to provide for them. I wanted them to have nice things, be able to be a part of things, like every other person. I wanted to have our home be nice. I wanted to be able to provide, have food. And so it was challenging when there wasn't any money there. Sometimes there was no money, and supernaturally people would put things on our doorstep, or your parents had a business where they just blessed us. We were able to order like things for our home that we needed and diapers and things like that. So God just brought it through. But it was an obstacle as a mom and as a wife to not know where the money was going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
And it always came through, but I didn't know where it was going to come from. And people would say, oh, we don't have anything. But, I'd be walking with someone at the mall and she'd say, hey, let's get a drink. And I'm like, oh, I'm good. I don't need one because I didn't even have a quarter to get anything. I'm like,
I wouldn't give her a quarter.
Obviously, I didn't dehydrate. God provided. But I'm just saying it was an obstacle to not be able to do some of the things that other people were able to do. But the thing that's so sweet is that our children never felt less than. When we tell them stories about what it was really like for us, they had no idea. They had a great childhood. They were able to be blessed to do things. There were some things that they couldn't do. Maybe, go out. They had friends that would go out to eat all the time. They couldn't go do that. But they had a great home, a loving family. And we did everything together, with the church. And so they don't have bad memories. It wasn't an obstacle for them.
You're great at shopping and getting deals, and you always look like $1 million. Your kids always looked like $1 million. I looked okay, and so our kids were able to do all the sports. Never did we not do sports because we were able to take vacations, and they had an absolute fantastic childhood. And they were able to grow up in our church as well and see these faith things, So you I think what we're talking about resistance and obstacles, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so in regards to obstacles and resistance, a lack can be an obstacle. Right. There's no doubt about that, but we have to press into faith. We got to just keep obeying. We got to keep moving forward, even when our resources aren't there. Another time when I think about obstacles and resistance, this is at a time when there were a few people planting churches, and not like unlike now, there's a lot of church planting, but there weren't very many, so we didn't have a lot of guidance. But some of the bigger ones that were doing mailers. And so they do mailers, and they had great responses. People would come to church, that kind of thing. So I remember our first time we did a mailer, and we were so excited. And, we put all our quarters together, and we, in faith, did the mailer, and we were so excited about. I don't know how many houses it went to, but a good amount of houses. And through that campaign, honest to goodness, okay, there were more people that called us to complain about the mailer than came to our church.
That's right.
That's resistance.
Yes.
That's obstacle.
It was very disappointing.
It's very disappointing.
I think another obstacle could be, or what's painful is that when you would invest in people and you loved them, you spent so much time with them, helped them, and they might get offended by something or just decide they were going to leave. And so it was really hard when you did spend this time, especially the people you spent the most time with, if they would just leave.
Right.
It was challenging because you think that you're moving forward, and I think moving slowly and the growth being so slow was very challenging.
Yes, absolutely.
We thought it was going to be way faster than it was.
the amount of energy we put in versus the amount of results we got
Right.
back was a constant obstacle and discouraging. And we're getting ready to talk about not quitting, but those are things that would
Yeah.
want to make me quit.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
some other obstacles that we went through. You know, we had landlords. We had because you didn't
Oh
own
my
your brand.
goodness.
So
Yeah.
there were times where our landlords, not because we weren't good people, but they were wanting something different in there or whatever, and they would try to push us out, or they would straggle us along, and so there are times we just didn't know like what next month where we would be,
Right.
and so those were obstacles having
Right.
to
I
having
can
to deal
remember
with
a
that.
period of time where you would be called weekly.
Mhm.
Like, you're going to have to get out and all this. And I was just so thankful that you had a personality that could let it go off your shoulders, and you had the faith, because that would make you nuts.
It does if you-
you know,
Focus on it.
Right.
It's absolutely. I also remember early on in the church, first weeks, first few months, you know what it's like, honey. You're excited. You're planning all week. You've been inviting people. You feel like you're going to have a good crowd
Yeah.
there. And what would happen?
Oh, you think all these people are coming. Well, if you got a phone call on Sunday
Phone
morning,
call on Sunday morning
you
is
knew
the call
somebody
of
was
death.
calling.
Okay?
Yeah, they're calling to
It's
tell
the
you
call of death.
they're not going to
They're
be
not
there.
coming.
So you'd get a couple calls. You never knew, and you would think, okay, before I leave the house, all these people are not even going to be there.
Right.
So that's kind of discouraging. You're hoping to have plenty of people for guests to come. I can always also remember an obstacle about before we had a worship leader
Yes.
that was
Right. Before we could
always
pay somebody.
full time.
Yes.
It was a weekly thing with you trying to find somebody to lead worship. It
So
could be
hard.
Thursday or Friday, and you're still trying to find someone. It was just
Stressful.
so stressful. Yes,
Absolutely.
it was so stressful.
So these are all obstacles that we have to press through. And
Right.
anything that we build for God, okay, just remember, when we have obstacles, that's a normal thing,
Right.
and
and the enemy wants us to be discouraged.
which leads us to number 5.
Okay.
Is endurance. You have to have endurance.
Yes.
In other words, a never quit
Right.
attitude. Lisa, there are so many times, as we've talked about already, so many times that, I or you, were tempted to want to quit but we never did. And honestly, it's probably the 2 greatest things I think that we did is that we took the vision seriously and acted on it, and we never quit.
Right.
We never quit.
Right.
And that was so important, because if we would have quit, I don't know all the many people over the years that have been touched. I'm sure God would have done something different, but he wouldn't have used us and wouldn't have used this church. So Lisa, there's a lot of different things that can make a person feel like they're hurting and they want to quit. Through the life of our, our season here, these 30 years, there's been people that, good people, loving people that have betrayed us and have come against us. And there's been lonely times. Oh my goodness, lonely times. I know that you had struggled with depression from time to time. We've had marital issues throughout these times. And I mean, these things are things that really can stress you and make
Right.
us just want to quit.
Right.
You want to speak to any of those things?
Well,
Anything?
just knowing that sometimes when things were so tough, you do feel like, is it really worth keep going? Because you were gone a lot trying to
Yep.
build the church, and I would always have to say, hey, don't forget about me, because I wanted us to have a close marriage. And so that got challenging at time. And it was like we were 24/7 on call, and there was always such need. There's just needs.
Right.
And, at times you just be so worn out emotionally and physically that you just want to quit, and
Absolutely.
I didn't really have anybody to share any of the things with that I was going through, and I didn't want to share anything happening within the church with someone in the church. So there was kind of a lonely feeling there that at times you just thought, can we do anything else? You
Right.
know?
Absolutely. Can we do anything else?
Right.
Loneliness is it's the real deal, and it's tough. And when you're out there doing something, building something for God, sometimes it gets really, really lonely. And today we're finishing up here, but we're talking about building something from nothing, creating something from nothing, and it is easier to build when you have connections and when you have money. It really is, okay? But the fact of the matter is you can't stop because you don't. And one of the things that became invaluable for us, because we were so lonely, we were into this thing 2 years, and like we said, we didn't have any connection. We'd left all of our connections. Right. We didn't have support. We were kind of in no man's land. People didn't know us, and we didn't have mentors. All the things that I would tell people to try to do, but we just didn't have them. And so I know that after about 2 years, we were really, really lonely, and it was hard. And we didn't have anybody to say, you can do it. We had our families, and, my dad, mom, all our families would encourage us, but it's just not the same. But I remember we went to a small church conference, a pastor's conference, and had the morning session. And then there was lunch. And after lunch, everybody was to take a few hours and then come back that evening. And we had a God moment. You want to tell the people about that?
Well, somehow we got connected and we met a sweet couple that was about 12 or 14 years older than us. And they were the pastors at Sojourn Church, Terry and Susan Moore. And during that lunchtime, they spent it with us. We went into the back room of some children's room. We all were sitting in toddler chairs.
I was in a toddler chair for 3 hours.
Yeah, pouring out our heart.
Crying on their shoulders.
Yes, telling them it was so hard. And they just encouraged us and loved us. And we just felt so hopeful again.
Right.
And over the years, they would check on us and at times, pray for us and try to help us out with ministry. And they were just such a blessing. And it was someone that had gone before us and had started a church that we could look up to. God just connected it with them. And so that really was such a pivotal point for us when we were so low to keep going.
It just helped us so much in the midst of our loneliness. It gave us purpose to move forward. Right. We're so grateful for them. Well, I understand we're coming to the close here. We need to shut this down. We're having a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed these stories and I hope that you've been encouraged. But we do want to encourage you because we know that you are building, whatever you're doing, you're building something. And why not build it for God? And even if you don't have all the resources in the world, you don't have all the connections, you don't have everything lined up. If you have a word from God, if you can see what he wants you to do and it's his timing, why not go ahead and launch? I want to encourage you to launch. And then all the people who have already launched, you move forward in your business, your family, your marriage, your church. And the enemy is whispering, saying, it's time to quit. Just throw in the towel. We want to tell you, if you don't quit, you win. Just outlast it. Outlast it. We had so many times that we felt like quitting. And, honestly, we could have said, this is the reason. And people could say, yeah, I can see why you'd want to quit. I don't understand that. But we didn't do it. And now, 30 years later, thousands and thousands and thousands of people have been reached and touched, encouraged, saved, set free, healed, delivered. Marriages have been restored. In some ways, because you had a young little couple that did not quit. So we encourage you, don't quit.
Right.
We're looking forward to part 3. We're going to be bringing Pastor Jamie Bates in, and we're going to pull the curtain back and get behind the scenes of these last 30 years here at the church. God bless you. We love you.
Bye-bye.